Okay, everyone, we are recording this meeting. It is being audio and video recorded. It's not on Channel 9, but we will have a recording of it and it will be placed on YouTube. With that, does everyone mind standing for the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it
for which it
stands,
stands, one
one
nation,
nation, under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice
for all.
Thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for joining. So we are here. This is the Dangerousness hearing. Before we get into any discussion, and anyone who wants to have a chance to speak will absolutely have a chance to speak. I just ask that we all, there are a lot of emotions. So I just ask that everybody remain respectful. You will be heard. And I will not cut anyone off as long as the conversation and discussion remains respectful. There have been some developments. And so, Madam Administrator, if you don't mind taking the floor, I did just want you to catch everyone up so that before the discussion begins, where we all have the same framework and level of knowledge going into the discussion. If there is one, if everyone wants to speak. Madam Administrator?
I'm sorry, I cut you off. I apologize. To the Thomases, my name's Mallory Aaronstein. I am the town administrator. I don't believe I've met you. And also we have the police chief on the phone. I'm not sure if everyone can see that. So he's here with us. I was notified that there was an incident and then provided with documentation which spurred this dangerousness hearing. There have been some developments today, but basically, Attorney Cohen, I believe we might be back at square one. So I don't really want to, no, we're not. So I might yield my floor if you want to do that.
So the way
I'm willing to work with it.
Sure. So I think, thank you, Madam Administrator. And before I get to anyone, we all were sent like a packet of information. So I assume we all have reviewed that before today's meeting.
We did not get a packet of anything.
You did get the reports though, correct?
I called the police station and got the reports.
That's what they have.
Okay.
They have the reports.
Yeah,
too.
that's all we have. I'm sorry, I should have been more clear. It was just the reports in there. So now that it sounds like we all have the same level of information, I want this to be orderly. So I want to go to Mr. Cohen. Then I would like the Thomases to speak. If at any point a clarification is needed, I would love either the police chief and or the animal control officer to weigh in as they see fit. But again, I do just want it to be orderly. And with that being said, and of course, board colleagues, you can always ask questions. Mrs. Thomas?
I just have one question.
Sure.
I did speak with the patrolman that took my report last week, and he had made an adjustment or an amendment to that report because he had inaccurately documented or misconstrued some information. So I'm not sure that the report that everyone has today had that updated information in it, and I wanted to make sure they all had the correct and up-to-date report that was amended this morning.
Animal Control Officer Ferry or Police Chief McDonald, do we know specifically what has changed and which report that was?
I did not receive an updated report. That would be Patrolman Barrow's report.
Okay.
I did have a correction because he did say it was a 14-day quarantine. It's only 10 days.
Okay.
In the state of Massachusetts now, but I don't know what else was corrected.
I can tell you what was
Sure.
what was corrected. When he came out to take the report, he had indicated in the report that our dog had been grabbed at the neck and mauled. And honestly, at the time that that report was taken, I had no idea what the injuries to my dog were. What he had done was he confused two stories. So I had stated that I did not know the condition of my dog at the time the statement was taken. And I did say that this has happened previously and then told him what had happened to our next door neighbor's dog. And he combined the two together and said that what happened to my next door neighbor's dog is what happened to my dog. So
Okay.
he amended
I
that
understand.
statement saying that he misinterpreted what had been said, and that at the time of the incident, I did not have injuries noted to my dog,
Mhm.
and that the injuries he called out in the report did pertain to the dog next door. And Stacy's report lines up with that amendment.
Yes, I was just
because-
gonna say,
Yeah,
I
so
thought she
her
did a good job
report
of
was,
detailing.
so
Thank you. With that being said, Mr. Cohen, sir, you have the floor if you want it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
You're
Chair.
welcome.
Horrible situation to have a dog attacked and die. And nobody recognizes that more than my firm does. Here, I've submitted on behalf of Mr. Duddy. I just got off the phone with him. He just signed it. Any hesitation was on my part because I'm a fighter, but we're not fighting this. He is making the decision to euthanize Roxy, and in communications with animal control, Roxy's quarantine is up, I believe, on the 27th. So
No.
his appointment, is on the 28th with Dr. Bruzy. So I think that's Friday.
Friday.
To euthanize Roxy. And if there was a way to do it sooner, he would have, but under the state law, the Department of Agriculture requires the 10-day waiting period. He's super, super disappointed in what happened, and he thinks this decision will bring at least some semblance of some peace to the neighborhood. So at least the Thomases don't have to fear that this would happen again. And while this hearing, I don't believe this hearing is about his other dog, Dozer. He is also relocating Dozer so that to bring peace and calm to the neighborhood. And some might argue, well, you have no right to move Dozer, but there's been no hearing on Dozer. Whatever happened about 7 or 8 years ago. And he just wants to bring a conclusion to everything. This would be a conclusion on the dangerous side. There's obviously still stuff pending with the Thomases. There's a bill that I would presume needs to be paid, and that can be facilitated through me or through him. But at this point, he's accepting the harshest penalty voluntarily for a dog, and he will admit to the sufficient facts of what these reports say. Although I haven't seen the reports, but we know what the end result was. And so he further guarantees, if Ms. Aristine has shared his affidavit, that between now and the date of euthanasia, the dog won't leave the property. He's not going to transfer ownership. So there should be no concern about that. I mean, I would even think that your town could have him surrender the dog sooner if you wanted to have it sooner, and then be responsible for bringing it to Dr. Bruzy. Obviously, he would pay for the euthanasia, but if there was concern, he would relinquish the dog now. But not if it's going to go straight to a shelter, because that's just too miserable for the dog, end of days. And he's really sorry about what happened. So at this point, I understand everybody wants to be heard. They have been heard. You were heard. Your dog was killed. Shouldn't have been. And the punishment is for my guy, he's losing his dog, and he's going to pay what bills you have. Or like I said in my email, if you have I don't know if there were medical bills, but if you have bills, if you have the value of the dog, if you don't have medical bills, there's ways to get you compensated. It's not going to bring your dog back, but as a lawyer, there's only a couple of ways I can help with that. And Again, Dozer will be leaving as well. And the hope is that at this point, the hearing would conclude in that we've reached the ultimate decision. The dog is dangerous. The dog's going to be euthanized under the statute. That's as strict as you can get. Thank you. Any questions? I'm happy to answer them.
Before I go to my colleagues for questions, so this is the way I want to do it. I want to go to my colleagues for questions, but I do just, before I go to the Thomases after that, Animal Control Officer Ferry, did you have any response to the, I don't know what to call it, the proposition, I guess, from Mr. Cohen? In your professional opinion.
I do have one concern. And
Sure.
it's not about him euthanizing or anything like that. It is about Dozer.
Mhm.
And I know this hearing isn't about Dozer, but I have to let him know my concern. And that is he's going to somebody else. And when I talked to Mr. Duddy, he said to me his Dozer had never killed another dog. Well, he had, because he started paying on a bill, so he knew the dog had some interaction with that dog. My concern is a dog going somewhere else without that person being told that this dog has had an attack on another dog. That is a big concern, because you see it everywhere. Dog goes somewhere else and it gets put in a house and it kills a child or kills something else. That is a grave concern for me, especially with a dog that already has a history.
And Madam Administrator, I also understand that this hearing is not about Dozer. We all acknowledge that, but there was mention of it in one of the reports, which is a public record tied to this hearing. So did you have any thoughts on this before I go to my colleagues?
No, thank you. I have no thoughts. I'd like to hear what everybody else has to say.
Sure.
I have no thoughts. I'm just an observer here.
Sure. And Chief, you can feel free to weigh in at any point as well. Selectman Goulart and Selectman Pacheco, if you want to come off mute and ask any questions of Mr. Cohen, and then I'll go to the Thomases.
I would like to hear from the Thomases first.
But okay, Selectman Pacheco? I can't hear you, Selectman Pacheco.
If you're it's *6 on your phone.
Yeah, he's here twice, so he just needs to unmute the
There
phone.
we go. Yep.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Yes, I would have, if Dozer was brought in before us for a hearing back in 2012, I understand it wasn't a selectman. However, at that time, I would have asked that Dozer be also euthanized. Unfortunately, it's 8 years later. I also want to hear from the Thomases and hear what their opinion is on what's been recommended as a solution for this case. So
Yes,
that's all.
I also just wanted to say before we hear from Rhonda and Michael Thomas, I just wanted to say that we're really sorry for your loss as well.
Mr. Chair, could I respond to the question put out by Ms. Ferry?
Yes, Mr. Cohen.
That is a very valid concern. Now that I know that whoever gets this dog has to know the dog's history. So to the extent I can make sure of that, I'll have them put together another affidavit. But yeah, that dog can't go unless, even if it went to another country, that person needs to know that this dog has, but I didn't know it has a kill on its record, you're saying?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And again, he's acquiescing. No one ever held a hearing, but he's still making it as easy as he can for everyone. So, which begs the question, if we are at that point, why do we have to go forward with hearing testimony? We know the dog was killed and we're killing our dog in exchange.
So
Because I think we have the right to speak.
Yes, I was just gonna say,
Since we're the victims.
it was not, so I actually recently, we put our dog down. It was not in an attack, thankfully, but It is an emotional thing. It's a family member. And so I personally do want to hear from the Thomases
Okay.
before I make any decision.
So I don't. So I'm going to check out of the hearing. You have our submission. It's valid regardless of my email. Ms. Aristine, it's valid.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen.
Thank you.
May I just ask a question before you leave? The one that you just sent right before this hearing is the one that we're going with, correct? The affidavit?
Yes.
You're redoing it. This is.
No. Go with this one. I'll get some information on Dozer over to you as well.
Okay, thank you.
Sounds
I'm
good.
sorry to the Thomases. I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you for the time.
Yes, and I don't know if you could hear before Mr. and Mrs. Thomas, but I did just want to say that I'm sorry for your loss. And just to tie in my thought, because Dozer was part of the public record, I do also agree with the animal control officer's professional opinion, which is we are aware, because of these public records, of a prior attack regarding Dozer. So even though that dog is not part of this hearing, the town is aware. And I do agree that we should be notifying any potential future owner of that incident. And with that, again, sorry for your loss to Mr. and Mrs. Thomas, and you both have the floor.
Thank you. So I'm probably going to start, but the one you really want to hear from is going to be my husband, because my husband runs with, we lost another dog, not to an attack, but natural causes, a year ago. And we lost this dog to this attack a week ago today. He runs with those two dogs, or did, every single morning, and runs by the Duddy household every single morning. On more than one occasion, he has been confronted by Dozer as well as Roxy on multiple occasions. The sad part of this incident is he was not able to scoop up our dog quick enough this time. Every other incident, he was able to scoop up that little 11-pound dog prior to it getting attacked. It should not be upon my husband to have to worry about being able to scoop up our dog when we walk it down the street as taxpayers in this town. He's blaming himself for the loss of this dog, which is not fair, because it's the onus goes to an irresponsible dog owner. This has been happening for years. Every person in our neighborhood that has been through an attack or we've been rushed at, people were afraid to come forward because he is a police officer. I know that has no bearing really on our case, but it does set a tone that people are afraid to come forward. If I had not come forward, this town probably would not have been aware of the multiple incidents that took place prior to this, because when I stepped forward, other people started stepping forward. And as it stands right now, knowing that Dozer is in that house, I can't even walk down the street with my granddaughter and feel safe and comfortable. I see our neighbors walking down this street, turning around and walking back up the other way with their dogs and their children, because everybody is petrified to walk by that home. And then I see other people walking down the street that don't know and continue to walk. And I feel like I need to go out and tell them that they're putting their lives in danger walking by that house, but it's not my place to do that. So I keep it to myself and I don't say anything. So I look to this group here to be making the right decision for this neighborhood. It's not just for us. It's traumatic, but I can't let my dog's life be lost in vain. Something needs to happen so that we can feel safe in this neighborhood. I'm going to let my husband, he's the one, if you have any questions about the dogs rushing at him and attacking him, he's the one who runs by these dogs every day. And the lackadaisical response that we get from Mr. Duddy, who barely comes out the door To this moment in time, I have still yet to have him acknowledge me beyond the day that I exploded at him on his front lawn, the day of the attack. He has still yet to apologize, say sorry, a note, nothing. He hires a lawyer, and that's what I have to do too. I have to hire a lawyer to defend myself. The neighbors next door told me, get a lawyer, because he committed to pay them for their vet bill. He got $100, they got $100, and he walked away. I have interment costs. It's going to cost me $3,000 if I want to replace this dog, which I don't want to do if I have the slightest inkling that he's going to have a pit bull there, because he's not a responsible dog owner. We have a hidden fence. My collars are up to date. I have my batteries on automatic shipment. We're always out testing it. We don't take our dogs out of this property unless they are on a leash. But yeah, I can't walk by that house and feel comfortable because the battery, this is all because he didn't change a battery on his fence collar, that I lost a family member. This is so unfair. Very, very unfair.
No one wants to see a pet, their dog die. I don't even, having another dog put to death does not make me happy.
It hurts.
However, I can only imagine if that were me walking with Olivia and my granddaughter, which we've done on occasion, with her holding Olivia's leash, because she's 11 pounds and my granddaughter can hold her back. If that dog came out, I don't know what would have happened. As far as Mr. Duddy, I'm slightly feeling disrespected by him not even being on this. And even more so that he sent his lawyer, and his lawyer didn't want to hear from us. I don't quite grasp there's no respect there. Why?
Not to mention that his lawyer has been calling me and trying to reach out to me. So I finally got a lawyer, and my lawyer has been contacted by his lawyer 5 times since Friday, begging me. I don't know that he understands this process, but begging me personally to let this go, stop the hearing, don't have a hearing, as it was my choice to do this. And I explained to him, this is not my hearing. I'm an attendee. I am invited to this. You need to take this up with the town. And, you know, we're here as an attendee. I have no responsibility for it. And I thought that it was really, really very poor judgment for him to send his lawyer to threaten me in many ways. Over the phone, 5 calls. My lawyer made the comment that said, I have never talked to so many people and had so many phone calls on a case that I've had for 2 days in my entire career. That's harassment. And then he gets on here and says he doesn't even want to hear from us. That's, as my husband said, very disrespectful. We're heartbroken. I have a 3-year-old granddaughter that doesn't understand why her favorite dog is not coming home from the hospital. And I can't even walk down my street. And he doesn't even have the courtesy to come over and say, we're sorry.
We'll be here.
Or be on this call and represent himself. He sends a lawyer.
There's nothing that can bring the dog back. I know that. If something comes good of this, it would be that no one else that this won't happen to anybody else, whether it be their dog, their child, anything. This should have never happened. Could have been avoided, should have been avoided. Wasn't, here we are. I just don't want it to happen to anybody. Anyway,
May I ask you a follow-up question, Mr. or Mrs. Thomas? Regarding the proposition that Mr. Cohen gave regarding the euthanization of Roxy and I don't know what the phrase is, but adopting out, I guess, Dozer. Excuse me, is that something that you, as the pet owners, would find palatable? I know you did you found the behavior not sort of objectionable, but did you find the proposition to be something that you both could live with? Again, we're sorry for your loss, and we know that this will never bring your family member back, but I just wanted to.
I think personally, it breaks my heart to even have to euthanize Roxy because he has 2 teenage children. And whether that dog is an aggressive dog or not, it's still their family pet. And that's really, really hard because I know the pain I'm going through right now. But on the flip side, I have to look at that and say, if that was a child or that was my granddaughter or anyone's child, this is continued behavior. It's a continued pattern. And over the years, the fact that we can talk about the same dog in multiple incidents or 2 dogs in multiple incidents, and there not have been any recourse or action, and the fact that he thought it was still okay for those dogs to be in that house and not take the extra steps to fence in his yard or confirm that their batteries on their hidden fence is working correctly, keeping them in the back where they can't see and letting them out in the front on the street. It's that just speaks to irresponsibility.
now, the concern I have with regards to the question is, if this happened in a different neighborhood and this other dog is now being relocated to my neighborhood, how are the neighbors going to be informed of that dog's history? Or is it just trying to bait and switch and move the dog somewhere else so this could happen again? That's my concern.
In Massachusetts, it has to be told to the ACO in the town, and the town then knows that there is a dog that potentially is a dangerous dog coming into their town. Now, outside of Massachusetts, I'm not quite sure, but if it's like Rhode Island, I can call Rhode Island and talk to the ACOs to let them know. I would like to know where the dog is going. It may not happen, but definitely in the state of Massachusetts, if a potential dangerous dog comes into this town, I am notified.
Okay. And are the neighbors in the adjacent vicinity known of that, or do they have to call? And how does that get relayed to the neighbors, or does it?
Public record, so anybody can call and say, oh, so-and-so's dog, somebody just got a new dog in my neighborhood. I wouldn't potentially go out because I don't want people to think, oh my goodness, there's a dangerous dog in my neighborhood, I can't walk the streets. But usually what happens is, my suggestion would be, if they're taking this dog into a neighborhood with a family, that dog be muzzled all the time. In Massachusetts, that would happen. I can't tell you if that would happen in Rhode Island or Connecticut or someplace else. We have some very strict laws in Massachusetts.
So I don't know that we're the right people to be answering the question as, is it an acceptable proposition? Because selfishly, as long as the dogs are out of my neighborhood and I can walk comfortably and safely down the street, I'm happy. But unselfishly, it really stinks that somebody else could be put into that position that we are. We know that these dogs are dangerous because we've experienced it, but new people moving into our neighborhood don't. And is it my place to be running out and telling new neighbors? Because that's like throwing somebody under the bus. It's not my place to do that.
I am also very concerned about this dog going to somebody else's house, but unfortunately, because it is an 8-year-old case,
Yep.
I mean, if it was reported at the time, we could have been doing the same thing 8 years ago, and we would have probably euthanized Dozer.
Yeah.
I would have suggested that at that time. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, because it's an 8-year-old case, it's harder. But
Yeah.
he did say, as long as he's willing to make sure the owner knows and people, the ACO knows, or somebody in charge of animals in that neighborhood knows, I'm okay. Because maybe, and this is going to sound awful, but maybe in under somebody else, this dog may not be the way it is.
Understood. I see the owner and dog interaction, and I would not disagree with you that the dogs may do better in a different home.
So I have to give him that chance at this point. 8 years ago, I probably wouldn't have, but at this point, it's been 8 years and no other reported.
Well, that dog has not attacked, but that dog, Dozer, has charged at my husband with our little dog on multiple occasions since then. The only reason there was no attack is because the dog is 11 pounds and my husband was able to scoop the dog up and run away down the street. If that had been our 85-pound boxer that he couldn't have picked up and run down the street, we would have been in this same scenario a year ago. So I know that you say the specific documented attack was 8 years ago. There still have been multiple attempted, more recent aggressions from the dog. I'm not going to say attack,
right,
but it's an aggression.
I do understand.
But not reported, because
right.
That's what it is. Dog runs out, you scoop up the dog, you run home. You don't necessarily think to pick up the phone and call the police on a case like that until something tragic happens.
Madam Administrator?
So, and I am very sorry for your loss, and I think you quite eloquently explained your position, and I happen to agree with just about every point that you made. So this specific hearing is about about Roxy. So we can't really do much about Dozer other than take your comments and your feedback. I guess the silver lining is that the town's involved now. Now we know, now we've been put on notice. I would like to look into what Attorney Cohen was proposing, what exactly, I don't have that affidavit. I have another one pertaining to Roxy that he sent just before this evening, which is why the board, you don't have that. He literally just sent it as I was on here. I'd like to see what he has. I can work with the animal control officer and follow up. And if they're going to be keeping that dog for any period of time, we need to get involved in enforcing the fence issue, the battery issue, and putting up some safeguards, I guess you can call them, like we would treat other dog owners and have treated with other dog owners. So we can handle that animal differently. But as far as this one, this is just specific to Roxy. So I'm not dismissing what you're saying at all. I'm just saying we're going to travel down the path
Understood
with that. Okay.
Yep, understood and respect that position.
Thank you.
Selectman Pacheco or Selectman Goulart? You can take
Yes, sure. I also, like you, Dr. Zia and Mallory, want to give sympathy to the Mr. and Mrs. Thomas for the loss of your dog. Having lost dogs in the past myself, I know what you're going through. And the tragedy of this case, having it killed, really makes it worse. I also agree with you that Attorney Cohen should have stayed and listened to your comments that you were making. And I'm really disappointed that Mr. Duddy wasn't present also. I understand why he hired an attorney. I get all of that, and he didn't have to speak, but he should have listened to what was going on. I'm really disappointed with that. And I'm disappointed in the fact that it sounds like the dog may not have been licensed. The dog may not have had his rabies shot. I mean, what's going on with that? So, you have my sympathy, and I do support the dog being put down, and I also am okay with the dog being moved to another home. I understand all the things that Stacy will do to make sure that the AOC knows what's going on in that town. If this was, like I said before, if this was before me years ago, we would have taken care of that dog also, Dozer. But that's not before us now, so we really can't do anything about that. So, again, you have my sympathy for your loss.
Thank you.
Selectman Goulart,
Yeah.
you have the floor.
I offer my sympathies too. We had to put a dog down after 17 and a half years due to ill health. So I know how awful it is to deal with something like that. Never mind have your dog attacked. I'm just writing some notes here. Both Roxy and Dozers are pit bulls.
Correct.
What's their ages? Does anybody know?
I know Roxy's around 10. I'm not sure about Dozer.
Okay.
She's definitely 10.
I was going to say that my understanding is that they were obtained together at the same time. So they would, I believe, my understanding is they're the same age.
Are there any of the dogs in the Duddy household?
Not that I know of.
Okay. Yeah, I'm reading the reports. The dogs are not licensed. Rabies vaccination are not up to date. Batteries not in either the collar and or the fence. There's a history here of, if you love your dogs or dog, you make sure they're properly cared for. And I think making sure that they are under control, that they're not a nuisance in the neighborhood, that they get shots, that they see the vet, that they get licensed. That's all part of caring for your dog if you really care for your dogs. There's no excuses not to do that. That in itself is a violation of state law, violation of town law. As far as Roxy goes, I don't see any option other than to put the dog down. I can tell you probably somewhere between 2007 and 10, we had a vicious dog brought before the board for a hearing. The dog had not attacked anybody, meaning a person, but the dog was such a, I'll call it mean-spirited dog. The neighbors were all afraid. They couldn't, back then we didn't have a leash law. So you took your dog's life in your hand if you let the dog go. It was a full-grown German Shepherd. We didn't put the dog down, but I'll say the dog was banished from town. And the only reason we let the dog go is because it went to a junkyard in Westport that needed a guard dog. And we never had any repercussions from that placement. But that's because it wasn't going to be dealing with children or adults in a household. It was going to be truly a guard dog, and it probably was a great guard dog. I look at this, yeah, I'm concerned that no one from the Duddy household, whether it's Mr. Duddy or the former Mrs. Duddy, are sitting in. The attorney that's representing them should be sitting here listening to this. If the people who lost an animal to Dozer are still willing to speak up and file a complaint, I would certainly consider having a hearing for that one.
I agree.
I don't care if it was 8 years ago. I understand how somebody could feel intimidated in the neighborhood. And I can understand how they would not want to take action that might have other kinds of repercussions on an individual. However, again, if those dog owners want to give a written statement, I will certainly support a hearing for Dozer. If possible, I would like Dozer held until we hear whether or not those people are going to file a complaint. If they don't wish to file a complaint, maybe we need to look into placement of Dozer somewhere else. Certainly not in this household, because they're not responsible dog owners. Another thing that I'm looking at here is everything I've heard today is a history of non-compliance.
Mhm.
Pick the rule, the law, the bylaw, the whatever, and I see non-compliance. The other thing I think we're all aware is, in addition to taking action to resolve the issues with Roxy, state law provides for fines. And I think this town should pursue whatever fines can be leveled against the owner of the dog or the person who harbored the dog, because our bylaw referenced not only the owner, but somebody who harbors a dog. So I think we need to look at those fines. I
Selectman,
realize outside of what we can do as selectmen, there are civil actions that the owners of the dog that was lost can take, because in effect, a dog is considered property in this state. So that's something that Mr. and Mrs. Thomas can consider outside of what we're looking at. I'm almost, excuse me, I'm in agreement with the animal control officer. I think Roxy should be put down. I think the town should pursue and institute and issue the fines that are provided by state law or by our bylaw. I would like to have a status update on Dozer and the case from 8 years ago, and that consideration be given if in fact those people want to file a complaint. We have a hearing on Dozer. The other thing that I will just say in passing to my two fellow selectmen, we are dealing with other issues here that don't relate specifically to the loss of this dog, but that relate to the conduct of an employee of the town of Dayton, and I will leave it at that. So that's how I feel about the issues of the dog attack and the subsequent death of the dog.
Selectman Goulart, I wanted to thank you for your comments. I think they were expressed exactly how I feel. I would like to look into, and part of the reason why in the packet of material that got emailed before the meeting of the report, the police reports and everything, the leash law was included in there, as well as some language about applicable Massachusetts general laws, because I also feel the same way you do. And if I may go just a step further, in a lot of respects, yes, non-compliance, but specifically with things like licensing, I would use the phrase a willful non-compliance. You are notified. I think we were actually late getting our license paperwork to the town. We paid a late fee. You are notified. There is no way you cannot know if your dog is licensed. The town does not let you forget that. And I think we need to take that into consideration. And regarding your last point, which I think is, for me as a selectman, one of the biggest points, aside from the tragic and let's be honest, preventable loss of an animal in town, someone's family member, are the issues that you raised, Selectman Goulart. And I would be willing to entertain at a separate meeting, perhaps executive session, that we discuss those issues in much greater detail, if that's okay with my two colleagues.
Thank you. You know, I think the other thing too is, we all know, as you just said, you get notified if you don't renew the dog license. The town clerk sends out more than one letters. We make announcements all the time about, you know, you got to get your dog licensed. We have a rabies clinic where you can get your dog, you know, vaccinations, or your cat, whatever, at a very, very minimal fee. And it's something we do every year to help residents take care of these things. The town clerk is there and is ready to issue licenses. I mean, I don't know what else we can do as a town. And I really think going forward, when the first letter goes out, it should be strongly worded. And if a second letter has to go, there has to be something indicating that the town is going to take action against the owners or harborers of unlicensed and unvaccinated dogs. It took so long to get the leash law, and now we've really got to put some teeth, no pun intended, behind this whole thing.
I also agree with that. I've been asking for years to be able to reinforce or enforce no licensing, and I've hit brick walls. So we need to be able to do this. All towns do it. They send out their first notice. If by this day it's not done, it's this much of a fine. By this day, they double the fine. And then by this day, if you don't do it, the fine then goes to, well, we're going to attach your license for the fine because you're not paying it.
Mhm.
I know a lot of towns that do that. So we need to, sometimes my hands are tied and it's frustrating. So being able to go after somebody that isn't licensing their dog is a good step, because then we will have compliance, especially with rabies vaccines. Most of the dogs in our town that bite somebody that I have bite reports for are dogs that are not vaccinated for rabies. Oh, we forgot or something like that. I can't require anybody to do anything except for a rabies vaccine. And we provide a clinic once a year. Most towns have clinics at least once a year. Tractor Supply does them once a month. There is no excuse nowadays not to be able to get just a rabies vaccine for your dog.
I agree.
Historically speaking, other than the incident that happened a year ago, involving us voting to put down dogs, up to that point, I had never voted as a member of the Board of Health, except once, to put a dog down. And that was a very, very difficult decision because the dog had been abandoned. The dog needed medical care. So the town provided the medical care. However, in providing the medical care for that poor dog, the vet who was treating it told us that it had another problem that needed surgery, which would have been extremely expensive. And although it would have eased the pain that the dog was having, the dog would never be fully running around like a dog, a healthy dog. And the vet's recommendation was to put the dog down because even with the surgery, which we considered, it was not going to solve the problem. And that's the only dog that we ever voted to put down. That was a humane action on an abandoned dog, but we did treat the dog as best we could until we found out about the major problem. So I don't take voting to put dogs down lightly at all, but I have to consider all of the circumstances and the reports and the evidence and the statements. And so I've expressed my feelings on this one.
Thank you.
I also do not take putting a dog to sleep lightly. It's not something I would recommend. I've had dogs at my shelter for a while and done everything we can to get them adopted. That was one of the first dogs that I brought to the Board of Health to have a hearing on because of to humanely euthanize the dog because of the pain the dog was in. And it hurt because he was in my custody for a while. But it's not something I take lightly in any way, shape, or form.
Dr. Z?
Yes, Chief, you have the floor.
Hi, everyone. I have a few things to say. To Mr. and Mrs. Thomas, very sorry for what happened here. Myself, and I can tell you this police department is sorry for what went on here, and we apologize to you guys, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, think about this. Most people have animals and pets. They treat it like their kids, and they really do. But this was a dog that was got mauled over there, and I really feel bad. It's a dog too. But what if this was a child? I mean, think about it. What if this was somebody's kid again, and we went through this all over again? That's very sad, and it's owner's responsibility for a dog to make sure he takes care of it. So that's all I got to say.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate it. And my position is if there's anything we can do as representatives, as the town, to prevent any loss of life, to prevent any loss of animal life, I think it's incumbent upon us to do that.
Can I just ask a question of
Mrs.
Stacy?
Thomas, may I, what kind of a dog was the dog that you lost?
A toy schnauzer,
Is that like a mini schnauzer?
just smaller, yes,
Smaller? And how old was it?
9 years. So she had
Do you have-
another 7, 8 years with us.
Do you have any other dogs?
No, she was our last one. Our
Oh,
other dog we had for 11 years passed away of natural causes last year.
okay, thank you.
So to my colleagues,
Brett,
oh,
I'm
yes,
sorry, I just
Thomas.
wanted to ask Stacy a question, kind of going back to Nancy's request about the other dog that was attacked. When you spoke with our neighbors, because I'm assuming that's the dog you're speaking of, my understanding, or I think they thought that they were reporting that incident formally to you at that time.
It is in my report. If you read my report,
Yep.
fully, it is in my report. But it would be good to have a written statement so we can open a case. I mean,
So I'm assuming that you're going to reach out to them
Yes, I will
and
reach
take
out to
care
her.
of that.
yes, I will.
do you have any other questions, Mr. or Mrs. Thomas?
No, I think we're good. We really appreciate everybody's concern, and we appreciate your sympathy. And we
Well, I just want
appreciate everybody trying to do the right thing.
Absolutely. I think I speak for everyone when I say, at least when it comes to this hearing, I approach it from partly from a position of, if this were me, if this were my dog that we recently put down. And so my heart goes out to you. And that's the framework that I'm using here today.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I was not asked, you can stay, but I just wanted to ask if you had any other questions, because I want to ask the town administrator regarding votes. I think we need to take a vote as a board regarding euthanization of Roxy. I think we need to have a discussion. I don't know what the proper procedure is, but to discuss the $50, I believe it's a $50 fine for the first offense of the leash law. Is that something we want to pursue as a board? Sounds like we do. So I am entertaining motions at this time regarding all three or all two of those issues.
Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
I move that we vote to euthanize Roxy, the pit bull that belongs to the Duddy family.
We have to set just clarification. I'm sorry. You can second it. We'll do this under discussion. If we need to amend it, we can. Madam Administrator?
Just seeking you to amend that you order the euthanization so that Mr. Duddy is absorbing those costs and taking care of it. That's how the affidavit is set up, that's how things will work. He'll be going to that appointment and taking care of things. So just that the town order the euthanization.
Okay, Mrs. Brady, strike that last one. Let me start over. I move that the town vote, I move that we vote to order Mr. Duddy. Does he own this dog?
Yes, according to
All
the
right.
veterinarian, he does.
All right, I move that we vote to order Mr. Duddy to have Roxy, the pit bull, euthanized following completion of the quarantine period, and that written notification of euthanization be sent to the animal control officer by the veterinarian.
And it's at his expense.
Yes,
I'll
and
second that.
at his expense.
I'll second that.
Thank
So,
you.
Mrs. Brady, it will be that we vote to order Mr. Duddy to have Roxy euthanized at his expense. Insert that clause. in there.
Thank you, team. We have a motion and we have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it, and that motion passes. Any motions regarding, Madam Administrator, is this something the animal control officer issues a fine? Do we need to vote on this?
I
it
would
not
just,
clear?
I think you should vote on it because it sounds like we're gonna have a second offense coming before us. So I would vote on this as the first offense. Our
Okay.
bylaw references chapter 140, section 173A as our fining structure, and the first offense starts with $50. And I understand that there were some other incidents, but because of the record, that's why I'm starting with the first.
Okay, that makes sense. I will entertain motions regarding the leash law violation, the first offense.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we fine Mr. Duddy under chapter 140, was it 173A you said, Mrs. Aaronstein?
Yes, that's right.
$50 for violation of the town's leash bylaw.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion, team? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it, and that motion passes.
Mr. Chairman, we also have violations of state law, licensing
Mm-hmm.
and vaccination.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make a motion that under the provisions of state law or town bylaw, that we find Mr. Duddy the appropriate fines for both licensing and rabies vaccination violations.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this?
I
just
don't know
want
what
to
those fines are. Do you know, Stacy?
I do. It's $100 a day for no rabies vaccine and $50 a day for being unlicensed.
When does that, in terms of calculating the total, and I'm not going to ask anyone to do that math off the top of our heads, of course, but when does that clock start ticking, Mrs. Ferry?
Well, I guess
That's
it would,
quite a penny.
it would start clicking when the dog wasn't up to date with its rabies vaccine. As of January 1st, it was not up to date with its rabies vaccine, and he also didn't get a license. So I would assume we could go back until the first of the year.
Okay. That sounds good to me. Just wanted that clarification before we voted, that's all.
Okay, and the other thing I would mention is that we discussed this particular vote with town council before we institute it, so that we're on solid ground.
Could we do a pending town council in the motion? Town council review?
So Karen, would you read back what I said?
You want your last motion?
Yes.
Selectman Goulart motioned under the provisions of state law, we find Mr. Duddy
State law and town bylaws.
and town bylaws, we find Mr. Duddy the appropriate fines for absence of vaccinations and rabies violations.
No, absence of licensure
Okay,
and lack of rabies vaccination. And Mr. Pacheco, I'll add this amendment, and that this vote be reviewed by town council before instituting the fines.
I'll second that amendment.
We have a motion and a second on the amendment. Any discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it, and that motion passes. Now back to the amended motion. Anything else under discussion on this?
Okay, this is on the original motion as amended,
As
correct?
amended. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want us to be careful about when the penalty starts. So if we're going back to January 1st, and it's $100 a day, we're talking like $20,000. So we can be conscious of that. So I'm not sure when the penalty actually starts. Is it when we get notified that there's a violation, or does it go back to January 1st? Did he ever have these dogs licensed in rabies shots? We need to know that information.
We have no record of the dogs in our system. So that means they're not in there for at least 5 years. So we would verify with council if we could go back. I would say you could at least go back to the date the incident was reported, which I believe was on Monday, August 17th.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's exactly why I suggested, I added reference to town council, because if we went back to day one, you know, the amount of money involved is horrendous. But I don't think, I think we need to institute, I'll call them reasonable fines, so town council can advise us accordingly.
Cool. And I think that's all covered under pending town council review. Any further discussion on this? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it, and that motion passes. One
Mr.
last
Chairman,
Yes, Selectman Goulart.
I move that we follow up on the incident involving the dog named Dozer, and that a report be presented to the Board of Selectmen relative to that attack.
I'll second that motion.
So my intent is, if the people who own the dog that was killed wish to file a complaint and in writing, then the Board of Selectmen can hold a hearing or take appropriate action relative to that attack.
Just a question under discussion. If it sounded like the attorney, Mr. Cohen, was saying that Dozer would be moved relatively soon, so is this all going to happen before the dog is moved?
I would not want Dozer moved until we get resolution to this situation.
Is that something we have authority? And now my question is to Animal Control Officer Ferry and Madam Administrator, is that something we can compel Mr. Duddy to do, to not relocate Dozer while we are investigating?
Once a complaint is received, I think the real question here is like a statute of limitations on something like this, and when does that kick in? Is it when we get notice? Because if we get notice, if that was whenever it was reported and Animal Control Officer Ferry spoke with the residents, then the town can impose kind of a shelter in place order on that dog that it can't leave. So I have to verify with council whether or not we can explore something that is 8 years old, because the town is just being notified of it.
Can we make a vote regarding Dozer that, just like the prior vote, is pending town council review?
Yes, I will amend my motion to include, Karen, would you read that back to me, please? The one to follow up on the report about Dozer.
Selectman Goulart, motion to follow up on the incident with the dogs named Dozer. And the prior event.
And that a report be given to the Board of Selectmen for review by town council before instituting action. Does that work?
Yes.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I just have one question.
Mrs.
So-
Thompson and Selectman Pacheco.
If Dozer remains on the property for the 10 days, whatever the disposition ends up being, how or can we be notified when the dog leaves the premises in whatever its disposition? Because right now, as you saw, my granddaughter just came in the door, and I'm not going to walk down the street with her knowing that Dozer is there. But I'm going to feel a lot more comfortable doing that knowing he's gone.
I think that was for you, Mrs. Ferry. Or Madam Administrator.
I can answer it. I'm looking at, so if you, chapter 140, section 157 lays out all of the restrictions and how the dog must be cared for if it is to be staying on that premises. I don't know if this is going to give you any comfort in those sorts of conditions, but the dog has to be confined to the premises, but that means securely confined indoors or confined outdoors in a securely enclosed or locked pen or dog run area, which we know is not secure, so we would force the indoor thing. And that when removed from the premises of the owner or the premises of the person keeping the dog shall be securely and humanely muzzled and restrained with a chain or other tethering device having a minimum tensile strength of 300 pounds and not exceeding 3 feet in length. There's a whole host of other restrictions here, but those are kind of the parameters. Also, just to be clear, there is this other affidavit. I keep checking my email and I haven't seen it yet. I don't know if maybe he's drafting it, but there is this other affidavit. And so we're dealing with a bit of an incomplete picture as it pertains to Dozer, but I think we have all of our hands in the fire about it.
Yep. Nope. Just.
Sure. And, feel free to call. You can call me, you can call the office if, you're looking for an update on where things are. I know you know.
Stacy has been fantastic. Stacy has been fantastic to work with in keeping us up to date with what she's able to communicate to us. So we really appreciate all of her efforts through this.
Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you, Stacy.
Okay, Selectman Pacheco, I think you wanted to have the floor as
Yeah.
well.
Yes. I think my question has been answered, that if Dozer remains in town until we have a hearing, Dozer should remain inside and not be allowed to go outside. And secondly, when we're talking about penalties, fines, and for not having a rabies shot and license, it also applies to Dozer, not just Roxy. So there's two dogs who are taking penalty.
There's another option too. We might not want to do this. I say this hesitantly, but we could also order the dog at our shelter for that time. But we have to be careful of our own personnel too.
Yeah, I would be.
So
that would make me a little nervous. Anything else? Were we in the middle of a motion? I apologize.
I think
We were. Yes, this is for Dozer. Anything else under this motion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it, and that motion passes as well. So I think this concludes this hearing. One last question, and then
Dr. C?
I have no more. And then we'll go to you, Selectman Goulart. Who gets notified? I know I'm not sure there are legal obligations regarding the notifications. Are we going to reach out to the potential neighbors in that area that were affected by alleged attacks by Dozer? Do they also get invited to the next hearing if there is a next hearing?
for Dozer is the, okay, sorry.
The second dog that we
Dozer,
were, that was
yeah,
not.
I mean, we would do exactly what we did here, extend the invite to the involved parties.
Okay, just making sure, because it sounds like the Thomases wanted to be kept in the loop, and I think if other folks come forward, I would suspect they would come forward wanting to be kept in the loop as well.
So
I
I would say, I'm sorry.
No,
I
okay.
would say from a perspective of Dozer, even though there was no actual attack on the animal, we were charged, and my husband was attacked for the, he scooped up the dog and ran away. So we were actively involved in Dozer's aggressive behavior as well.
So you
as
would,
many of our neighbors.
Would you come to a hearing if there was one on Dozer, Mr. and Mrs. Thomas?
Yes, we would.
Selectman Goulart, I believe you had your hand up. You have the floor.
Yeah, I know that the attorney, Mr. Cohen, had said that, what Mr. Duddy has chosen to do. But in just reading that section of the law that the town administrator sent to us, he has the right of appeal if he doesn't like the action the town has taken. As I said, his attorney stated the case, but he does have the right of appeal. And since he has an attorney, I would assume his attorney would tell him what his rights are. Should he change his mind on Roxy or wish to appeal our decision on Roxy, or if we have a hearing on Dozer, so that would all apply. So I think in looking at what has been sent to us, we've covered our bases relative to Roxy.
I agree with that, Selectman Goulart. So with that, if no one else has any thing else to say, I will entertain motions to close the hearing, and then I will entertain motions to adjourn. See, I did that correctly.
Yes, I make a motion, we close the hearing on
I
Roxy.
I have a
I
motion.
second it.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. And I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Thomas, ACO Ferry, Mrs. Brady, and Mrs. Aaronstein. Everyone have a wonderful day. And Mrs.
Thank you.
Thomas, we're
Mr. Pacheco, I love your cat. Is it a she or a he?
the star of the meetings.
Oh my goodness, adorable.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.